Hi everyone. If you saw the last video, you know the powerful architecture that we are aiming for. That automated CI/CD pipelines that take code direct from our GitHub into GitHub Action, from GitHub Action to Docker, from Docker into Kubernetes cluster and EKS. Now let's talk tech stack. For this specific microservice, I'm using Laravel for the backend, Vue on the front end, tied together using Inertia. For authentication, we are going to leverage Laravel Breeze. Laravel Breeze is a library built on top of Laravel that provides you with authentication out of the box. I chose Laravel because of good integration tools like Laravel Breeze and Inertia that offer authentication out of the box, so we don't need to write our own authentication. Today we stop talking theory and start building our development environment, starting from creating our GitHub repository to creating our CI/CD pipeline using GitHub Action, and finally setting up our Docker image to containerize our application. Let's start by setting up our GitHub repository. You give your GitHub repository a name. I'm calling mine OfficePilot with no spaces. This is the recommended way to create a GitHub repository. So you give it a description. OfficePilot is a HR tool for HR and PM, HR and PM tool for startups. This is just a simple description, but you can edit depending on your project. So let's choose the visibility. I'm keeping mine as private, but you can make yours public if you want. Basically private, your repository will be owned by you and no one can contribute to your code unless you invite them as a collaborator. While public repositories is open source, so everyone can contribute to the code. Let's add README. README helps you to describe more about the application, such as the version, the tech stack you're using. And finally, I'm giving my project a license, MIT license. Let's create the repository. So after creating the GitHub repository, you don't need to write code direct on your main branch. So far, after creating the repository, it comes with the main branch. So if you are adding features, you need to create a branch, and that branch, let's call it feature branch. Feature branch is where you add new features in the application. So let's create the new branch, come to new branch, and then let's call it feature. So we already have our feature branch, and then we have our GitHub repository. So we created our GitHub repository and we created our feature branch. The next step, let's set up the Laravel environment and Inertia environment. So if you want to read more about Laravel, you can come to Laravel documentation, and this is how it is done. So I already have Laravel installed in my computer. I can just use Laravel and then new plus the name of the application I want to create. So let's go back to our terminal and I can type Laravel new. So the name of the application I want to create is OfficePilot without any spaces, like this. So the Laravel installer will tell me which starter kit do I want to use, and I want to use Vue. So the next thing is telling me which authentication provider do I want to use. That's why I was telling you, if you are familiar with Laravel and Vue, you can use Laravel Breeze. So I'm using Laravel built-in authentication. It was first called Laravel Breeze, but it is now integrated into Laravel automatically. So I can use Laravel Breeze. I can use a PHP unit for unit testing. And do I want to boost my application with AI assistant coding? Yes. So it's now creating the application. This might take long, but I will fast forward the video and then come back when everything is installed. Now that the application is fully installed, let's view the application inside Casa. Type code dot. So our application is here, it's open in Casa. Actually, Laravel is battery included, but what I mean by battery included is that it has a lot of files and folders. So Laravel is a framework, it's not a library. So you expect a lot of things and you expect a high learning curve if you're starting to learn Laravel. It's simple, but I'm not saying it's too easy, but you know, it takes time to become familiar with all these folders and these files. But the main focus of this application is not Laravel. I'm just using this Inertia as my client. Because of Vue, I'm using it as my client. So this application is actually going to be a microservice application, and I will leverage Vue inside Inertia as my front end. But I will do some backend also within this Laravel. It is actually microservice application, so the rest of the services will be built using Go. So enough with the talking. Let's run the application. let's run it. You run it using composer, run dev. Composer is actually a PHP package manager, so you use it for downloading PHP packages. So let's run it. Our application is now running on localhost port 8000. This is actually the backend server, and then our frontend server here, that is to serve the asset, is running on localhost 517173. So let's open it in Casa. Let's open it in Auth. So this is how it looks. You can go to your dashboard. I have a user created. Let me log out the user. Then let's register a new user. This user, let's call him David. And then we have David at dev.com. And then we have a strong password 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9. Actually, this starter kit does not have verification of password with 1 2 3 4 5 6, but that is our logic. We have to add it. So we will add the logic so that a user cannot create a password 1 2 3 4 5 6. We shall make the user to create a more stronger password. So let's create it. So it leads us direct to our dashboard. So this is the dashboard. All this comes out of the box just with the Inertia. This UI is built on top of a UI framework called ShardCN. ShardCN formerly it used not to support Vue, but currently it's supporting Vue. It was only it only had support for React, but now we have support for Vue too. And it's actually a beautiful framework. I can show you the website. So these are all the components that you can use from ShardCN. It has a lot of components like buttons, it has forms, it has payment UI. So it's actually a great UI library. If you want to use it, you can get a lot of components from here. And in this application, I will be leveraging ShardCN and use a lot of components from here. So back to our application, we have a lot of things here. Let's go to setting. We have passwords. We can change our passwords. All this comes for free. You can even change. You have dark mode and light mode. See, so Inertia is actually a great framework. So I advise you, if you use Vue and you use Laravel, Inertia is a must. You must learn Inertia. Now that we initialized our application, the next step is to integrate this local repository with our remote repository. If you do not initialize your Git repository, your Git local repository, you can just use Git init. So I have already done that. That's why I have these green dots. For your case, you can do it if you do not yet initialize it. The next step is we have to add the other remote repository to our local repository so that we can easily push code in our local repository to our remote repository. To do that, you have to do git remote add origin, and then you paste the URL to your remote repository. So to get that URL, you have to go to where you created your GitHub repository, and then click on code. You will be provided with this URL. You can copy this URL and then paste it here. So after that, we initialize the Git remote, the local repository, and we sync it with our remote repository. Let's confirm that. To confirm that, you do git remote -v. That's the version of the remote. So this is the remote repository that we have. So one thing that I need to explain here, we created our remote repository, and then we created our local repository, and we sync them together so that we can manage to push code from our local repository to our remote repository. And remember, when we created our remote repository, we had code inside our remote repository. So what we have to do is to pull that code, because we cannot push code from our local repository to our remote repository. The remote repository will tell us that there is code in the remote repository, so you need to pull it so that the code can all be synced. So what we have to do is that we have to do git pull origin, that is the name of our remote repository, and then the name of the branch, that is main. So we pulled everything from our remote repository to our local repository. They were the license. So this is the license and the copyright, and then the README file that was inside the remote repository. So the next step is, let's push everything inside our remote repository. Let's say git add git commit -m, and then let's give it a message. Let's say initialize the application. So we added everything into our staging area. Say git push -u origin main. So now everything is inside our remote repository. Let's verify that. Refresh the page and check. So we have our application with our readme and all the code. So that is a great step. The next step, we will be configuring our GitHub action, and then we'll talk about CI/CD. How does it work and how do you configure it using GitHub action?